Hey guys, I'm here to talk to you about secondary sources, and I apologize for the lateness of the video. I just got caught up with teaching my other classes and home stuff. So I told you in class that I would go over types of secondary sources, and I kind of went over this a little bit in the other video about secondary sources, and I'm glad we talked so much about different kinds of sources in class the other day when we outlined that essay from the textbook on the organic food. So you have plenty of ideas to draw from that outline that you guys filled out, that strange handout with all the boxes that we filled in together in class. But I wanted to just go over a few other options because this will pay off for us not only for this evaluation argument, but the next argument that we're going into after this one. So for tomorrow's draft, you have two choices, and this wasn't put in the homework, but it's in the video, so if you're watching it, you know what's going on. You can come to class with either of two things. Just a printout of the secondary source that you want to use, that you found, and I'll help you to get it into your draft before you turn your draft into me by the end of class. Or, of course, you can find the source and then actually put something in from the source into your essay. And so I'm going to cover kinds of secondary sources for those of you still looking, but certainly, again, as I've said, this pays off for us for later because we're going to be searching for sources for the remaining essays that we write for English 122. And then also I'm going to go over that sandwich handout that I gave you. I don't have a copy of it on my home computer. I thought I did, so I'll just speak from it. You know what I'm talking about, that hamburger, that sandwich handout that I gave you that I said is about how to use sources. So I'll go over that very briefly and try to make this video as short as possible. So let's start with types of secondary sources. I've listed 5 here, and there's certainly many more different types of sources that you can research, but I think this is a good list to start with for the evaluation argument in which you're evaluating the quality of something, whether that's aesthetic, remember, or practical or ethical. And we've identified in class already which one that you have. We did that a couple class periods ago. All right, so the first kind of source that I might look for, and I'm going to use my specific example, and you guys will have to apply what I'm saying to your own paper. You guys remember I'm comparing 2 novelists. One is always sort of classified or identified as a horror writer. Her name is, gosh, I'm just having a brain fart because I have so much information in my mind right now. I'm looking up on my shelf so I can remember her name. Oh, for heaven's sakes, I hate when this happens. Okay, well, one is Muriel Sparks, who is the realistic writer, and the other one is, oh my goodness, this is so silly. This happens to me sometimes. She's the one who wrote The Lottery. Oh my goodness. Why can't I remember her name? I've said it in class and I know her stuff so well. I'm just having a thing where Shirley Jackson. Yep, just came to me. So, and she's the horror writer, and I'm comparing these two because I want to argue by looking at Sparks' novel that she's writing horror the same as Shirley Jackson. Okay, so one thing that I might look for secondary sources is biographical or professional information on either author. But since my focus is going to be on Muriel Sparks and trying to prove that this one novel that I've read for me is actually like horror, I'm going to look her up. So you'll notice I'm clicking on this tab and I've searched for Muriel Sparks, and of course I'm getting lots of different articles on Muriel Sparks. The first thing we're always going to see when we do a search engine search is Wikipedia. We all know that some professors ban it from papers, academic papers altogether. I certainly don't like to use it myself because I know it's not always a credible source. Different people can contribute information to the wiki, so you never really know if the information you're getting there is accurate. So that's usually why we stay away from it. I like Wikipedia though for the very bottom of each page that is presented in Wikipedia. There's usually a list of sources, so you can a bibliography kind of. So you can kind of look at that if you like. But I see other sources. One by the New Yorker, which is definitely credible and academic. One by the Guardian. This is a British periodical, which is probably credible, but maybe not as academic as the New Yorker for an American academic essay. And so I'm going down, and there's all kinds of, I want to avoid Amazon because that's just going to try to sell me something. And here's another New York Times, a Salon article. So I have lots of choices. If I want to go get some information about this woman's life, her personal life, or if I want to find out about her professionally, I can use one of these. If I feel like that's good information to put in my essay. I don't know if I want that, but I'm just showing you that that's a kind of source you can use. The second one is information about the topic itself. So for me, that's, comparing a realistic text to a horror text. And so the next thing that I found was this article, which I went ahead and pulled up. And it's a woman looking at many of the different novels that Muriel Sparks wrote. And down here, she's talking about the one. You guys see I'm moving my mouse around this title. This is the book that I'm going to be writing about in my evaluation argument. So I'm really drawn to this paragraph a lot. And actually, in looking at all these sources, I think this is the one that will work for me the most in my evaluation argument. And I'll come back to this one in a minute because I'm going to show you how I pulled a quote and show you that hamburger thing in a few minutes. Another category, so, here's where I've broken down information about the topic itself. So you guys can see how I'm applying it to my own paper. And you guys should do this too. Like, you might not just be finding information about, I remember one person or a couple of people are writing about divorce in our class. You might find basic information about divorce, or you might find a website that talks about the reasons people get divorced, or you might find a source about what happens to children when people get divorced. Just giving some ideas there. You can break down this kind of source, information about the topic itself, in many different ways, and so you can go off in different directions depending on the source that you have. The third I don't have an example of, but of course you can analyze the text. If you are looking at lyrics, if you're looking at a book, if you're looking at something that is in a movie and you want to analyze or evaluate the meaning or the quality of something within a film, when a character says something or when we see something in a film, we looked at that movie review, so you guys know what I'm talking about. You can find the original text. I'm looking at number 3 right now. You can find the original text online if you don't have a print copy of it, and maybe do a little bit of evaluation of the actual words of the thing. And again, this is dependent on your topic, right? Some of you aren't necessarily looking at a text in that way. I'm thinking of Angelique Stratt that we workshopped on Monday, the hamburger restaurant. So her evaluation isn't necessarily of a text, black and white words, black words on a white page, but she's looking at the quality of the food, maybe the atmosphere of the restaurant, etc. So your text changes depending on what your topic is, right? You can find reviews written by other people. And we talked about this in class when we workshopped the drafts, finding reviews of what people have said about these things. For those of you doing music, you can go to any music magazine website and see if there are articles about the album or the tracks that you're looking at. And then, of course, the last one that I have here is definitions of terms. I want to show an example of this because I have number 5 up on my screen. I searched for, my search was conventions of a horror story. Conventions are usually just the rules, I'm using air quotes, the rules or the expectations that people have when they come to a text, and what they imagine they will see because they're writing in a certain genre, right? So I'm comparing one genre to another based on the really strict rules or conventions for those genres. And so it might be useful for me to define what some of the horror conventions are. And this might actually even help me with my criteria. I was developing those in class when we did some pre-drafting. So I might be able to use some of the definitions when I set up my criteria as well. And that's an idea for you too. Go find out what the expectations are for the thing you're evaluating using somebody else's words, and it might give you some language, give you some angle to use that you hadn't thought of before. So use sources to your advantage. I mean, this isn't a situation where I'm saying just use a source because I'm telling you to use a source. Writers use sources to fill in the blanks that they don't know about their topic and speak more intelligently from those sources because they found the information, and it makes you a more credible writer because you're using the sources that give you this information. So this is really why professors care so much that you find reliable, credible, if not authoritative. Authoritative meaning the source that is the most respected. And from a college standpoint, that's usually academic sources, but you guys have heard me say in class, this isn't necessarily a paper where you're writing about an academic topic. And I'll give an example of that. Rich is writing about cars. That's not an academic topic. So he has to find the sources that are most respected in the car industry and will lend him some credibility as the writer because he's found some really good sources and that give good information about cars. So hopefully you guys hear what I'm saying. You want to pick a source that fits your purpose for writing. And your purpose for writing is to evaluate this thing that you've chosen to evaluate. And so you'll find sources that fit that purpose. All right, so hopefully that helps you a little bit in thinking about what kind of information you can find. And certainly you heard me say at the beginning that I haven't given a list of all the kinds of sources you might look for, but that's a good start for those of you who have no idea what kind of source to look for. So you'll remember that I said I think this is the secondary source I want to use. So what I did, and I'll just show you this quickly, is I pulled a quote from, oops, I got to slide that back over so you guys can see it. I pulled a quote from right here into my draft because this is one I think I want to use in my evaluation essay. So now I'm going to go back over to my draft so you guys can see underneath my list of kinds of sources, I've given the same quote. You guys will see this quote has been used in each of these examples. What I want to cover very quickly, and I will do this more thoroughly tomorrow, is that sandwich handout, that hamburger handout. So the first thing I'm going to do when I find a quote that I want to use in my draft is I want to make sure I introduce that quote or give some kind of lead in. I think the hamburger handout says introduction, and then it gives a list of different ways you can introduce the quote. So look at this. Each time I use this quote, all these examples I'm going to show you have the same quote. I'm introducing in a different way. Here I give the author's name. Here I write a full sentence and I put a colon at the end of it because I want to kind of focus on the idea instead of who said it. And that's appropriate to do. That's one of the options in the top bun of that hamburger handout. Here's another one. My introduction is right here. And then this one, excuse me, in this one I use the author's name and kind of point to the idea that I'm looking at. So I use two of the options in that top hamburger. The bun of the hamburger. And I know that sounds ridiculous. I'm talking about a hamburger and talking about quotes, but I'm trying to set up this little metaphor so you guys see there's kind of three parts to using a quote. Introducing it, and then the middle part's all the MLA rule stuff, which we'll go over in class. Who cares about that right now? And then the bottom part is how do I respond to the passage that I've pulled from my source? How do I tie it into my draft so it's not just somebody else's words that feel separate from what I'm doing? And then in my last one, I do a really basic, just another author example, but I want to show you that you can just do the author's name and then a verb to move in or introduce your quote. These sentences that I've just highlighted to show you how I'm introducing this quote, this same quote each time, show you the variety that you have in introducing your sources. You don't want to use the same introductions all the time. And really quickly, I'll just go over, of course, I've added an in-text citation. It's the same one each time. I'm not going to talk about that in the video at all. I'll cover that in class tomorrow. Before you turn in your draft, I'll help you to add your in-text citation. You'll remember I said in class that I have no expectation tomorrow that you have any of the MLA format. We will go over all of that in class tomorrow because I like to cover it and practice it with you in class so that you learn it on the spot and apply it on the spot to your draft in class. And then the last thing that you see is the same in all of my different quotes. And I call these quote hamburgers, quote sandwiches even sometimes, because they have all three parts. So I have the introduction to the source right here. That's the top bun. I have the quote itself in the MLA format. That's the middle part of the hamburger, like the hamburger itself. Maybe it's a veggie burger. I don't know. The lettuce, the cheese, the tomato. I know I'm being ridiculous right now, but my point is here's the specific thing that I'm putting into my paper, and I have to make sure it's sandwiched between the top bun and the bottom bun. So I have part one, part two, and then the last part's the bottom bun where you have to respond to the quote and make it fit into your essay. And each time, again, I've typed the same thing. So you guys will see in the handout that I have in the screen, you can pause this and read them right now if you want. So you can see how I've just set it up differently each time, but each time I'm responding to it a different way. And I imagine that this quote is in a body paragraph. I'm putting this in one of the body paragraphs where I'm trying to prove this novel that was written in more of a reality-based genre of setup. You know, it's a realistic novel. I'm using this to prove that even realistic novels can have horror.